Good day, and welcome to this month's episode of Diversity Speaks True Talk with Terri. I'm Terri Howard, Associate Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Herzing University. Here at Herzing, we believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion are a living, breathing part of who we are and what we do. So we've created this series in part because we wanted to create a forum for civil discourse. We won't always agree, but let's speak our truths in a way where we can listen, learn, and as a result, grow. Also, there's lots of questions out there around topics related to diversity and inclusion. We hope to shed light on some of those topics and leave you with something to think about. True Talk is all about taking the time to really understand everyone. So let's get talking and speak our truths. Today's topic is understanding microaggressions and their impact on others. So, in my freshman year of undergraduate school, I attended a small private university in a small Midwestern town. I say first year of undergraduate school because I transferred after several experiences like the one I'm about to share. This university was actually located in the middle of downtown. In fact, the bookstore was on the main street of the city. The walk to the bookstore was about 3 blocks from the campus. So one day, when I went to purchase books for my first semester, I found myself being followed by 2 men who were from the local community. As I turned to go into the bookstore, one of them yelled, "Hey, look at that coon!" My response was only to myself. Being alone, I was thinking about my personal safety. I just shook my head and whispered, "Wow, that's not even up to date racism." A few months after that, at the end of the school year, as I was preparing to transfer to another university, I went to our family reunion. Like most, I had put on the freshman 15, but felt comfortable in my skin. That wasn't until my aunt greeted me at the reunion with, "Ooh, I see we're still growing. You know, you'd be so much prettier if you lost some weight." Both of those experiences are considered microaggressions. And if you ask me which hurt the most, I would have to say it was the comment from my aunt. Microaggressions are often referred to as death by 1,000 cuts. And in my experience, that's a very appropriate definition. This is my truth. So, why are we talking about microaggressions? First, let's define what they are so we're all on the same page. The term racial microaggressions was first proposed by psychiatrist Chester Pierce in the 1970s, but psychologists since then have significantly amplified the concept. In his landmark work on stereotype threat, Stanford University psychology professor Claude Steele has shown that African Americans and women perform worse on academic tests when primed with stereotypes about race or gender. Women, for example, who were primed with stereotypes about women's poor math performance, do worse on math tests. Intelligence test scores of Blacks plunged when they were primed with stereotypes about Blacks' inferior intelligence. In the study, Steele defined microaggressions as subtle racial expressions. Now, you may have heard the saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." The fact is, words create reality, and these expressions go well beyond race. In fact, microaggressions, now deemed as brief, everyday indignities that are verbal, behavioral, or environmental, may be intentional or unintentionally communicated to women, to people of color, to LGBTQ individuals that have an insulting message behind them, often cause severe psychological distress and harm. Microaggressions are often further defined in three very distinct categories. There are micro assaults. These are conscious and intentional actions or slurs, such as using racial epithets, displaying swastikas, or deliberately serving a white person before a person of color in a restaurant. Micro insults, verbal or nonverbal communications that subtly convey rudeness and insensitivity and demean a person's racial heritage or identity. An example of this might be an employee who asks a colleague of color how she got her job, implying she may have landed it through affirmative action or a quota system. And then there are micro invalidations. These are communications that subtly exclude, negate, or even nullify the thoughts, feelings, or experiential reality of a person of color. For instance, white people often ask Asian Americans where they were born, conveying the message that they are perpetual foreigners in their own land. So, what do we do? Our guest today knows about microaggressions as well as their impact. Alvin C. Hill Jr. is currently the Senior Director of Diversity and Cultural Competence for the Milwaukee Center for Independence. Now, MCFI is an organization that's really dedicated to developing innovative approaches to assist and support people with disabilities, disadvantages, serious mental illness, and employment barriers to better life. We know that this population of people can also be targets of microaggressions. Al is responsible for the overall planning, implementation, and oversight of MCFI's workforce and supplier diversity strategies. He manages initiatives with direct oversight of the agency's diversity team as well as two employee resource groups. Under his leadership, MCFI was awarded the Wisconsin Association of Equal Opportunity Strategic Diversity Council Award and was twice awarded the Wisconsin State SHRM's Diversity Advocate Award. First of all, welcome and thank you so much for being a part of today's episode on microaggressions.
Thank you for having me, Terry. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I know that Milwaukee Center for Independence is really rooted in helping and developing really innovative approaches to supporting and assisting people with disabilities. I also know that this happens to be a population of people that can also be targets of microaggressions. So, how have you seen microaggressions impact your clients?
Well, Terry, I've seen microaggressions impact our clients when they don't feel appreciated or that we don't understand them. We do satisfaction surveys every year with our clients, and we'll ask a question: do you feel that MCFI meets my needs? And so certainly that's a time that our clients can express themselves if they want to as well. And actually, now that I think about it, Terry, I've actually been involved with some situations where clients felt that there were microaggressions that were said against them. And actually, I came in with the client base and really did some discussion surrounding the impact that microaggressions can have even in the client population.
Sure, sure. And I imagine that that certainly doesn't just happen in the walls of MCFI, but actually outside in the real world, they can often be targets. My sister happens to walk with a cane, and the perception that she may be handicapped in the mind as well sometimes is very disturbing to her. So I think folks, unfortunately, who have some disadvantages, whether it is mentally or physically, can be targets of those microaggressions. So, as a result of this, really, what is your organization trying to do as a company created to support those folks who might be targets of microaggressions?
Good question, Terry. First of all, I think what we try to do is, first of all, I really believe that knowledge is helpful in changing behavior,
Absolutely.
because you don't know what you don't know. And so sometimes all of us, when we're talking about, diverse people, uh, oftentimes we don't know what our blind spot is. And that's because oftentimes, depending on our values and norms that we were raised in, or who we are interacting with on a regular basis, we take on those values and norms. So to be able to educate, I guess, people as to other people's values and norms will help minimize microaggressions. So what we've been doing at MCFI is we have a very aggressive cultural competence learning and development initiative. So we, as an example, try to make that very broad based as well too. Anything from persons with disabilities to veterans to persons of color to gays and lesbians. All of the whole gamut, in order to to really make them more culturally competent by teaching them and learning more about the population they serve. Now, if you talk about persons with disabilities as an example, the language throughout the years since I've been coming up in my adulthood has certainly changed quite a bit throughout the years. So as an example, if you are still using the word retarded as an example for a person with disability, now that has changed to basically saying that it's a person with cerebral palsy as an example. We don't use that word. So, and the same thing has happened within other communities as well too. So to try and really reflect, the things that will cause microaggressions and be proactive at that is really what we want to do, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. I just wanted to piggyback for a moment and suggest that it's not only the learning that you're doing as part of that initiative, but just engaging people with each other, right? So, just in the fact that they're coming together as employees is a way for us to learn about differences in people as well, I suppose.
I think that's very important, that people are able to talk with each other and understand through their lens, or otherwise be able to speak their truth. And so we've really become very, very intentional with setting up the opportunities for our employees to engage with one another, so that, if we are able to have these transparent and open conversations, that enables a person to speak through their lens about how they feel about certain things, or about how the things that people say. And I think when you open up that dialogue, that opens up the possibility that somebody else gains a better understanding of the types of things that can cause microaggressions, certainly. So as an example, Terry, I know for me, and I've mentioned this in open conversations, people have said to me, well, you speak very articulate. And that's one of the things to me is a microaggression. While the intent might not be harmful, the impact certainly is. So to be able to express that to somebody in an open dialogue, I think gains their understanding for the next time they, as an example, interact with another African American, another person of color.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Our next question.
As a student, what are some activities I can engage in to prevent me from making microaggressions?
That's a very good question. I think I always recommend that everyone set a goal for themselves on interacting on a personal basis with somebody that's out of their cultural realm. And either in the workplace or on campus, as a whole, we interact with people that are different nonetheless. But in the workplace, we're paid to do that. In school, you're trying to get an education. So I challenge, including myself, anybody that on your personal time, which is the time that we're most comfortable, and we most of the time go back to communities that we're comfortable with, I would encourage you to really seek a group that you're not as comfortable with, or you don't know much about, and seek them out, and have regular conversations to become part of that community. I think that's one of the best ways that you can grow your cultural competence. I really believe that when you stretch yourself, and sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable. I believe me, I know that. I have personal goals for myself in doing that. But I think that's one of the best ways that your person who's asking the question can stretch, increase their knowledge about people that are different than them.
Excellent. I think we have time for one more question.
How do I approach someone who has made a microaggression against me? I mean, what do I do if I'm the target?
That's another good question, Terry. I think the best way to handle that, first of all, is to not approach him in a defensive manner. What I do in a case like that, I would say to the person, I would say, as an example, I'm just going to use you. Terry, let me clarify what you just said. I would like you to understand how what you said made me feel. So can you help me to really what you really meant by saying that? By doing that, I didn't attack them or said, well, what you did was wrong. It really upset me. I took onus for not understanding and asking them to clarify. That will then, I think, put a person where they're not on the defensive, and you can get clarification. Once you open that dialogue, then you are able then to be able to come back and say why that hurt you, or why that you thought that was inappropriate, and to help them out to see that. And I think when you do that, that you take these times to what we like to say, a teachable moment is really what you want to do. And hopefully then that's a win-win. Certainly you've clarified your position on what was said to you and how it was said, or how a person non-verbally even looked at you, as an example too, because microaggressions come in many different fashions. So that's what I would recommend to your person that's asking that question, Terry.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Al, for sharing your truth and inspiring us all to be better than we are today.
And thank you for having me, Terry.
Although they're seemingly small and sometimes innocent offenses, microaggressions can take a real psychological toll on the mental health of their recipient. This toll can lead to anger and depression, and can even lower work productivity and problem solving abilities. Plus, they can affect work or school, the whole environment, making it more hostile and less validating, and perpetuate stereotype threat. None of this is really hard to imagine if you simply consider how it would impact your life if you felt like you were subject to a constant stream of insults and slights, and were always either bracing for or recovering from an offense. Think about that and ask yourself, how might my words impact another person before you say anything? That's our truth, and that's our show for today. Be well, and see you next time.